Hey guys, I'll be going over the Vocation Balance changes announcement, which I assume is going to be the finalized version of what's coming out post all the player feedback and that kind of stuff from the test server. So I've already went over the EK one, but I wanted to be kind of reacting in real time to the changes because I've not read any yet. I haven't spoiled myself about anything yet, so it's going to be interesting for me to see what they decided to keep, what they decided to change. Because even up until the last announcement about this, they kept it kind of vague about what they were going to do, stuff like that. Well, I guess we'll get to it whenever we go over these finalized changes. Finalized, I mean, I'm assuming they're finalized. Okay, so blah blah blah. None of this matters. What really matters are the changes. AoE rune adjustments. Avalanche, Great Fireball, Thunderstorm, Stone Shower have the same base power as 50. Prior to this, the base power of Thunderstorms and Stone Showers was 45. So when they announced that they're going to nerf runes, originally, that's why they kind of decided to shrink the size and buff the damage. Then they reset it back to the original size, and then they claim they nerfed the damage, but it seems like they raised the base power of all runes to 50, but don't let them fool you into thinking that this was actually a buff, because this did raise the base power of Thunderstorms and Stone Showers, but based on a friend's test, so take this for what it's worth, it seems they tweaked the damage formula for runes so that they actually do lower damage. So whatever the base power of the rune is, doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to stay the same as before these adjustments. Your sorcerers should expect a little bit less damage, and druids could get more damage from their runes after the update than what it was before, but that is just based on the fact that there's the elemental stance, and as long as you're using ice or earth runes, so avalanches and stone showers, etc., you would do more damage with those runes, which that explains the findings that I had in my videos of testing hunts, where I was actually getting more XP per hour using runes only after the test server changes versus before. So it seems that it might have been just because I've used the elemental stance, which means that druids with the elemental stance should expect higher rune damage after the changes rather than lower. And on test server, I wasn't even using Runic Mastery, so Runic Mastery may be back on the table. I completely dismissed it after they shrunk the rune sizes, but then they raised it back again to normal. So Runic Mastery is still pretty viable. After they shrunk it, it may have been a completely useless wheel perk, but now they restored it back to actually being effective. So, that tirade aside, let's get into the actual stuff. So Explosion Rune increased from affecting 5 to 9 squares. This is really nice. 9 squares is like the minimum side in which Explosion is actually viable to use in a regular hunt or boss or whatever. So this is nice, because this is literally exactly the size of a box. Um, unless they mean 9 squares, like a line 9 wide. I doubt it, but you never know. Charm double proc adjustment. Yes, they've removed Charm double proc in AoE. So Diamond Arrows no longer proc charms on any other monster except the original target. Gift of Life Improvement now additionally recovers 30% of your max mana. I don't know if my feedback on the forums during test server had anything to do with this, but I was one of the people who pointed out that the way the system worked was really dumb. So you have the mana buffer thing they added to mages, so you basically, instead of dying, you take 8 times the amount of damage you take as mana damage, as if you have a mana shield that is 8 times that takes 8 times more damage automatically. But then the way they set it up is that if that happens and your mana reaches 0, then your health reaches 0 and you die. Then Gift of Life would pop, and you would get a little bit of health, but you would still have 0 mana, so you would just die again, and Gift of Life would go completely wasted. And there's also various nuances to this where it makes it even worse because you could have survived without Gift of Life or without this mana stuff, but otherwise, anyway, they made it way more logical now. My suggestion was that rather than it triggering that Gift of Life triggering last, then it will only trigger last if you have more than 5% of your max HP, and that before that it would trigger it would instead of giving you health, it would give you a free mana shield cast. That was my suggestion. And a free mana shield cast would do the same effect of basically saving you from dying. But I'm glad that they made this. This is way better because now if you would have died, Gift of Life gives you health, but it also gives you mana, so you can now heal yourself back, something you couldn't do during the test server, right? So if you would take lethal damage, your mana would drain first, then Gift of Life would pop, and you would have no mana to do anything about it, and you couldn't save yourself after Gift of Life. This enables you to save yourself with a little bit of mana from popping Gift of Life. That's actually pretty cool. So yeah, with this, it completely solves the issue with combining this with mana buffer. So this is very, very good. Group XP bonus. The XP bonus for groups consisting of 2 and 3 different vocations has been increased. This is great because now, or not only now, but for a very long time, Tibia had basically a few different hunting parties: solo, duo, or full team. And duo was way less common at higher levels because you can't do shit duo. You can't really make any good XP with a druid and EK. Ironically, I would make way better XP if I was hunting druid and sorcerer duo rather than any other vocations. But that's kind of awkward because druid and knight are supposed to be like the best unit, where you have one tank and one healer. That's like the most basic RPG party you could have of 2 people, right? So they're encouraging duo and trio hunts. So more duo, which was the least common method of hunting, and more trio. I'm 100% in favor of this. This is great because now you don't really need a full team. I mean, you could kind of, if there may be locations where if you go duo, you would make better XP than if you'd go with a full party, or even more so if you would go with 3 different vocations rather than a full party, because now you only have to split the XP 3 ways rather than 4 ways. I'm honestly thinking that 3 people could be even better than 4 people in terms of XP. But I guess the math would highly depend on various nuances, which there's no point really getting into, and it would depend on the spawn, and it would depend on the team, and stuff like that. Combat mode removal. This is again one of those things that is really great, and I can't complain about. As I mentioned in my previous coverage of the announced changes before the test server. So combat mode's no longer available. This is great because they served no purpose. There was literally no purpose. Mages were always on full defense. Knights and paladins were always full attack. This was completely pointless. Nobody used this. So they're removing it completely, and now basically just characters gain various buffs just overall, globally. So attack and defense without you needing to do anything about it. And this applies to all characters, but obviously it's gonna mostly affect EKs. and also paladins and maybe monks. No, paladins are going to mostly benefit from this first one. EKs are going to mostly benefit from this second one, and mages are not going to benefit from this at all because the defense value of a spellbook is so low and it gives you so little protection that once you're past level 100, this doesn't ever matter ever. Maybe for mitigation, but that's a different issue. Speaking of mitigation, the mitigation formula has been adjusted to reflect the removal of combat modes. So the changes to combat modes was already good enough. Now they're also changing mitigation. And this is actually pretty huge. So they more than doubled the mitigation you would get from the wheel, and they almost multiplied by 5 the mitigation you would get from gems. Well, I guess by 4. Yeah, exactly 4 actually. So yeah, it's 4 times what it was before. Now, what is 30% mitigation multiplier? That is, I guess, something we have to figure out, but it was 7.5 before. Now it is almost a third of 100%. So I don't know how these multiply together. I guess EKs would be way more interested in this than I am, and I'll leave it to people who know better than me what mitigation actually does, except for the fact that it prevents some damage somehow. Monster mitigation has been increased. I don't like this. I hope this doesn't make some monsters way more tanky to the point that they become unhuntable. So I hope that they know what they're doing with this one. Potion management improvement. So basically, there's going to be a potion that all vocations except EKs can use. There's going to be 2 new potions that all vocations can use, and they cost 50% more gold, which I always said means nothing, especially at mid to high levels. Paying more gold isn't really an issue because it comes off of your supplies for the hunt, and when you split the loot, it takes everything into account. But this actually could be considered a massive healing buff, because if an EK previously needed a certain amount of turns wasted to drink multiple smaller mana potions in a row just to recover, let's say, 500 mana or 1000 mana, now they need less potions to do so. That means less potion turns spent on filling mana, meaning more turns during which you could use supreme healing potions. So this could be considered a massive healing buff. So the 50% more gold cost for ultimate mana potions is not an issue. The fact that EKs could use ultimate mana potions is already crazy enough that it completely justifies the gold cost. And EKs don't really spend that much mana anyway, so the 50% extra cost is going to be barely anything. This is insane. EKs are going to be really happy about this one, I think. Great mana potions can now be bought by all vocations, so EKs just get a flat-out upgrade to great mana potions over strong mana potions. So even without the 50% extra gold cost, just using great mana potions for their regular price is already going to be a pretty huge upgrade as well. Energy Ring is now going to consume double the amount that it did. They started it by 3 times the amount of mana per point of damage, but they reduced it to 2 because RPs were just instantly dying before they could do anything. The moment they popped their energy ring, all their mana is gone, and then their chances of survival go down the drain. Ultimate Healing Rune gets cancelled. Using it on other characters. I have tested and made sure that you could still use UH runes on bosses where they have a mechanic where you could heal them. So, for instance, the Updendriel boss. And the reason I tested it is because I didn't know how Cipsoft would actually code the part that says that you can't use UH on other players. So did they code it so that you can't use UH on other players, or did they code it so that UHs could only be used on yourself? If it was the latter, then you wouldn't be able to use UHs on bosses. I'm glad that they actually did it correctly. Stance quality of life changes, so all vocations are getting stances pretty much. Only MSs have 2 stances, obviously because they have their regular vocation stance, and the enemy debuffing spell now became a stance that works by which kicks in as a passive by dealing damage. So whenever you deal damage to an enemy, it will get one of your debuffs depending on which stance you have for those debuffs. Sorcerers are the exception. It's possible to have no stance active. I mean, makes sense, but it is now possible, meaning it wasn't previously. But I was under the impression it was. I guess not. Active stances now persist between sessions instead of resetting. This is a nice quality of life improvement, but not that important because you could always just click once and change your stance. It's not a big deal. Getting into the vocations. Knights. Starting with the promotion, a knight can now switch between 2 stances. Blood Rage, so this is what previously used to be a spell. Grants extra damage and increases damage taken by 15%. So basically what it does now, pretty much. Protector grants 30% shielding. Shielding improves mitigation. Shielding also corresponds with extra healing. So Protector now grants you 30% extra shielding. Your EK's healing scales off of their shielding, as it says here. Healing spells of knights now scale better with magic level and shielding. So if you use your Utamo Tempo, you're getting 30% shielding, so a huge buff to healing, pretty much, and mitigation, and your shielding, because it has its own inherent damage reduction, even though shielding is kind of useless in that sense because it barely reduces damage, but let's leave that aside. And reduces damage taken as well as damage done by 15%. So ignore the damage done. This means this is just in addition to all of that, there's also 15% reduced damage taken. Keep this 15% flat damage reduction in mind because we're going to get into something interesting a bit later. Mana cost adjustments. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, probably I did, but EK is the only vocation that I have previously read already. All the other ones are going to be completely new to me. I have not yet read past Knight in this article. The skill bonus of both stances impacts your total skill, obviously, yes. And the stances replace the spells which are no longer available, which is fine. Mana cost adjustments. They slightly raise the costs of various spells. I don't know what the point is of giving them mana potions, as in, yeah, we understand EK's struggle with keeping up mana. Meanwhile, they're raising the mana costs of various spells, but again, who knows? It's not by much, so it's fine. New spells, Shield Bash and Shield Slam. They're both the same thing, so Shield Bash is single target, Shield Slam is multiple targets, Shield Bash is 4 seconds cooldown, and Shield Slam is 6 second cooldown. So let's just go over what they both do, which is you hit all adjacent enemies, so all enemies around you in a box, dealing damage based on the defense value of your shield, which was, as we mentioned here, raised. The defense value of all shields has been raised by 30%, so this is just the combat mode removal buffed our the shield defense by 30%, and that means that you would also deal more damage with the Shield Slam, and reducing the damage of the target's next auto attack within 10 seconds by 50%. So Shield Slam does the same thing in an AoE, so within the next 10 seconds, when they would give you a melee attack, you only take 50% of that damage. And there's also an augment that I'm going to just skip to now so I won't have to, which is the Shield Slam augment. 15% Life Leech, which I don't know if that is going to be any good or not, because who cares about Life Leech for one specific spell, but whatever. But the second node would give you plus 25% damage reduction for a total of 75%. Meaning, instead of 50% by 10 seconds, it's going to be by 75% for 10 seconds. Add that to the defensive bonus that we mentioned a second ago of 15%, and now they're taking significantly less damage. Healing adjustments. The healing spells now scale with magic level and shielding. And the way it actually applies in the game seems, at least from my friends testing on test server, EKs can self-heal really, really significantly, even though all healing spells now doubled in their cooldown. So EKs can only use healing spells once every attack turn rather than twice every attack turn. Okay, blah blah blah. Let's see. Consequently, the base power of all healing spells has been reduced, and the value of proficiency perks has been doubled. So they made it more dependent on proficiency perks. I don't like that. I mean, this needs to be... I guess people need to check out what exactly changed in the proficiency perks, because they will not probably list the changes to every single weapon, but who knows. Bruisebane, base power is now 15. I don't know what any of these were before, so I'm not even going to get into it. But Intense Wound Cleansing got a massive buff. Base power is now 500. I think this was actually raised, but I'm not sure. Cooldown reduced from 10 to 2 minutes. That means you could spam it 5 times as often, and augments that reduce the cooldown of Intense Wound Cleansing will reduce it below 2 minutes by however many seconds, rather than reduce it from 10 minutes by however many seconds. So let's say if you have augments that reduce your Intense Wound Cleansing by 30 seconds, so it's going to actually reduce this by a quarter rather than a 20th. So that's good. All augments that reduced its cooldown... Oh, damn it, I should have kept reading. Augments that reduced its cooldown were adjusted accordingly by 80%. So never mind. Ignore everything I just said, because now it turns out that all of the cooldown augments were nerfed 5 times over. So they would actually be proportional to the actual change in time from 10 minutes to 2 minutes. All night healing spells have a group cooldown. Yes, we went over that one. Existing spell improvements. Chivalrous Challenge. Higher jump range and hits an additional target. Nobody can complain about that. This is really important. They kind of really fucked it up the first time, because what they did is they made it in an AoE, and it wouldn't really track anybody. It wouldn't chain to anything. So if you had enemies on either of the 4 corners of your screen, you would just never be able to grab anything. And with this, you could still grab it, and it chains way better now. Base power has been increased from 72 to 80 on front sweep. I'll go to the... Well, actually, we already got to the augments, so we could just go over them now. Front sweep. 40% base power, which is pretty huge. And the second perk makes it apply to 5 squares instead of 3. So the way this would work is if you had, let's say, 1, 2, 3, you now add 4 and 5 on your sides. So it now looks like a C shape rather than a 3 square meter line. So that's gonna be how it's shaped. So basically, an EK could stand with his back to a wall and do what monks are doing and wall box, and use this as a very, very powerful method of dealing with 5 creatures. I think this will open up a lot of possibilities for lower level EKs to hunt in higher difficulty spots by not needing to full box the monsters there. They just wall box less of them. They take less damage, so they could hunt in more difficult areas. Now they don't need to full box. They could take less damage, therefore they could go there at a lower level. Meanwhile, their damage against those 5 targets is increased if they do use front sweep. So depending on how powerful it's going to be with the first 40% base power increase and all of the other adjustments to base power and just like attack and stuff like that, this could be a very interesting strategy, but mostly for lower or mid levels, let's say up to level 500, 600. I don't see EK's wall boxing much beyond those levels. Shield Slam augments, we've went over these. So the first one is Life Leech, which I don't think is useful in any way, and the second one is extra damage reduction for the next melee attack within 10 seconds of the enemies around you. Replace Chivalrous Challenge 1 and 2. That's fine. So they just flat out buffed Chivalrous Challenge in order to save 2 spots on the wheel. Ground Shaker augments 1 and 2 were swapped. In other words, the cooldown reduction for Ground Shaker is the first one that you unlock. So lower level EKs, will have access to this so that they could do a proper AoE rotation. So up until now, and I'm sorry for the EKs watching that I'm going to bore you with details that you already know, but just in case people don't, EK's rotation would go Exori Gran, Exori Mass, then again Exori Gran, Exori. Now they can't use Exori Mass again because it has an 8-second cooldown. So they have to use Exori Min, front sweep. So it made the rotation pretty awkward. But if you get the cooldown as the first augment, it's -2 second cooldown, meaning now from 8 seconds it went down to 6. So you could do Exori Gran, Exori Mass, Exori Gran, Exori Mass. And in fact, on my noob EK, that is exactly what I did. I set up a multi-action hotkey with first priority Exori Gran, second priority Exori, third priority Exori Mass, and you just press the same button over and over again, and it does your entire night rotation brain dead, easy. Augment 2, I believe, is extra damage, but I don't remember exactly, but I think it is. Battle Healing has been reworked, now increases the effect of your healing spells by 10%. So the Battle Healing perk of the wheel will now give your increase the effect of your healing spells by 10%, which I remind you was buffed because now they increased the effects from magic level and shielding, and they gave bonuses to shielding. So yes, everything's buffed by 10%, which is pretty significant. The bonus is tripled while wearing a shield. So 30% extra healing in addition to all the previous buffs that the healing got in general. So this is absolutely necessary. Why? Because of the removal of UHs. So without UHs, EKs are completely dependent on the ED, and the entire team is dependent on both the ED and the EK to survive. And if anything is fucked up for even a second, if the ED gets trapped while luring and the EK doesn't have a healer, there is nothing he can do. Under normal circumstances, if they would not touch the EK healing at all over what it is now, then EKs would just die, then the rest of the team would die, and the ED would obviously either die or get away or whatever, but it would just fuck up the whole thing. What would happen now is that while the ED gets trapped, the MS and RP might throw UHs on the EK to keep him alive while the ED is trying to come and help. So they're removing that. Now every vocation has its own role, a way better defined role. So the EKs, it seems that they're aiming towards EKs being dedicated tanks, which I'm 100% in favor of. Up until now, current Tibia is all vocations just want to be equal to each other in terms of DPS. So all vocations are DPS. All vocations just have equal DPS in team hunts. I don't think that makes any sense. I think it would be way more sensical for EKs and team hunts to use a shield, to be tanks, to be able to be more, to have better defenses and stuff like that, and then compensate for the lost DPS with boosting the DPS of the other vocations, That's how they do it pretty much as a staple in every RPG that there is today, in every MMO that there is today. Each class has its own role, and in Tibia it's the only exception where everybody does everything pretty much. So they want to put a stop to this. I'm 100% behind it. I think each vocation would benefit from having its own defined role in what they do in a party and what their job is in a team. I like that a lot. I think that people need to like flip a switch in their head where up until now everybody was just equally DPS. Maybe RPs were slightly higher DPS. That's why they removed the charms from Diamond Arrows. But all vocations were equally DPS vocations. I think this is the versatility and the choices that players now have to about how they're going to approach certain hunting spots, what the team composition is going to be. I'm really in favor of all of this. This is great. Now it's no longer like a static four-man team as the meta, and if you're not a EK, ED, RP, MS, then you suck, and you can't do anything if you don't have a four-man team, and you're going to be left behind if you don't have a four-man team of exactly those vocations, and each guy also doing all the other roles like healing the EK. It's ridiculous. It's just like the vocations don't even really matter in today's Tibia. This is going to make them matter. So that's why I'm behind it. That's the philosophy behind these changes, and I am in favor of this. It's been a long time coming. This should have came years ago, in my opinion. And again, sorry for that ramble. Let's go on. This bonus is tripled while wearing a shield. No longer grants healing when challenging. I didn't know this is a thing. What the fuck? Since when was this a thing? I mean, I think that this is actually pretty cool, but okay, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Combat mastery has been reworked. Take less damage, the lower your life is. Now, this is interesting. The bonus is doubled while wearing a shield. So, assuming you are an EK, and you are a defensive EK, so you're using a shield and a one-handed weapon. So, for every 8% of missing HP, you take 1% less damage. So if you have 80% missing HP, meaning when you're at 20% of your max HP, you're taking 20% reduced damage. Okay, 20% isn't much. But remember, there's another 15% less damage taken if you're on Utamo. So meanwhile, it's just a 35% flat damage reduction where you take 35% less damage while you're on Utamo, not counting mitigation, not counting the shielding bonus, not counting the extra healing from shielding in terms of survivability and all that kind of stuff. This is crazy. Just the damage mitigation alone, the lower your health is really, really good. I really like this change specifically for EKs because, again, it makes them tank better. And this is really, really, this would work really, really well and synergize really well with the ED's Grove wheel slice. So, in case for those who don't know what the Blessing of the Grove does for EDs, it's the top right slice, and what it does is that when you heal somebody, they get healed more based on the percentage of their max HP. Essentially, the lower their max HP, the more you heal. They get a healing percentage bonus. So if an EK is on deep red HP, they will get healed for more. So when they're on deep red HP, they get defensive bonuses, so they take less damage, and they get more healing. This is really, really good. This is amazing. Okay, now let's go into Paladins. This is all fresh to me. I don't know about anything about any of this, so let's get into it. So a Paladin will have two stances. 40% distance fighting for sharpshooter. The skill bonus impacts your total skills, including bonuses from gear and other buffs like potions. Replaces the spell sharpshooter, which is no longer available. They're not writing any downsides. So did they just nerf the distance fighting boost and give no negatives whatsoever? Does this mean that Paladin Utito is now just going to be a no-brainer to just use the whole time? Because they were experimenting with healing, incoming healing reduction, but it seems they just completely skipped over that and just nerfed it a little bit so that there's no negative side effects. Actually, this is really good. I like this because RPs were whining constantly on test server about how nerfed they are, and it does in fact nerf their damage. But the fact that they could use Utito as a no-brainer, where before they needed to be super extra careful just to not die while they Utito, I think this is a pretty solid buff for them overall. So reduced damage over what it is now, sure, but they could use it all the time instead of only in certain situations. Divine Defiance, I recall that this one was actually had a lot of potential. So let's see. Grants 7.5% of distance fighting as holy and healing magic level, as well as a 15% dodge against non-adjacent enemies. So the dodge against non-adjacent enemies is counterintuitive because it means that paladins will take less damage, but only from the monsters that are not in the box with them. So every other monster that's outside the box is gonna deal less damage. Which, for double boxing, let's assume a double box, so 8 and then another 5 square meters next to the EK, right? That means that in a double box with no other monsters anywhere around, the paladin would take 15% less damage from 5 out of 13 mobs. That's not that great, right? But the healing magic level is probably huge. And if they can swap these pretty quickly without a very high cooldown on how often they can switch stances, so that they could actually switch to this stance when they're in a dangerous situation, and back to sharpshooter to get out of a trap or whatever, if they could switch back and forth pretty quickly, then this should be pretty insane. Because 7.5% of distance fighting, this rewards players that have been training their distance a lot, with even more damage from holy spells and even more healing. So distance fighting now becomes like magic level in a way. Very interesting. Divine Barrage. I have not seen this in action. Well, I've seen it a little bit, but I don't know exactly what it does. What it is, I think it's like a 3x3 that hits in where the paladin is aiming. Hits your target and the area around it with holy damage. 140 base power, 4-second cooldown. Interesting. Oh, and I believe that this had pretty interesting augments. Actually, I'll read this and then I'll go to the augments. 175 mana and learn level 70, same size as diamond arrows. Damn. That's actually pretty good. This spell scales with your magic level like Divine Caldera. Well, at first I thought it was a 3x3, but apparently it's like the size of a diamond arrow. So it's like they could have runes that deal holy damage and scale with magic level. I don't know what 140 base power means, but I hope it's not too powerful, because this by itself could be pretty crazy. Holy damage is the best element in the game, period. And if they have a spell that deals it in such a massive AoE, that's kind of crazy. And the fact that it has a 4-second cooldown, so you could actually... Fuck, you could rotate this with Exori... with, not Exorimass, what's it called? Masan. So you could do Masan, Divine Barrage, Masan, Divine Barrage, Masan, Divine Barrage. At least the way it seems to me, because they both have a 4-second cooldown. So you could just spam lots of AoE holy damage all the time. That is kind of crazy. And I think a lot of paladins will actually hunt like that. So paladins, it's I don't know if the diamond arrow size was also on test server, but this seems like a crazy buff for pallies, and I don't know if they really have a lot to complain about anymore. Ethereal barrage, so it's kind of the same thing but physical. 40 base power. Why? I'm guessing 40 base power because if it also had 140 base power, then it would scale like crazy off of distance fighting and deal way too much damage. So I'm guessing they had to nerf the base power so that it would scale differently. So they would be kind of equivalent. This would be holy and this would be physical. Both spells allow 3 targeting modes with crosshairs, with crosshair position below your target, or if you have no target below your character. Now, this, well, then they wouldn't be able to use diamond arrows, though. So yeah, this option is not good. I was thinking maybe if you could actually set it to this, you could go Divine Barrage, Masan, Divine Barrage, Masan. I mean, I guess you could still do that, but this plays better when you have no target, and to use diamond arrows, you would need to target something, and you can't really. Oh, below your target. Okay. So yeah, if you target something, then this hits your target and everything around it. So yeah, I think actually, yeah, this would be the good mode. So it's not just under you if you have no target. So you could use it in both ways, I guess. If you have a target, it's gonna hit it on the target and around the target, and then you could do Masan around yourself. Or if you have no target and you prefer not to target anything and you prefer to just deal damage around you, let's say that would actually be better than using a diamond arrow, then you would just press escape so you don't target anything anymore, and then you would just hit everything around you every attack turn with lots of holy damage. New AoE ammunition. This is, I'm guessing, the AoE elemental arrows. Shatterstorm arrow deals physical damage with 27 attack. So this is like the low-level diamond arrows, I think. Firestorm, Terrastorm, Froststorm, Thunderstorm. These are just like AoE. Small AoE arrows that deal less damage than diamond arrows, from what Sipsoft said. But these would still be like top tier, specifically in spawns where things are strong to physical. So potentially, actually, you could use on some spawns where enemies are strong to physical, so let's say specters, you could use elemental arrow and then 2 holy spells per turn in an AoE. I mean, not per turn. This and one of the AoE spells per turn. So pretty good, even though, again, diamond arrows are, for the most part, better, and I don't really think there's too many places where you would use these at all. Existing spell adjustment. Swiftfoot now allows attacking and casting while being active. Okay, but damage dealt is reduced. Well, damage dealt by you is reduced by 30%, which is fine, I guess. Individual cooldown has been reduced from 10 to 4 seconds, and necessary group cooldowns from 10 to 2 seconds. Secondary group cooldowns. So, you could spam this every 2 attack turns, and this is like a disengagement spell, I'm assuming. So you cast this and then you run away from combat so that you don't take a lot of damage. Or if you want to run to a pull or something, you don't really need to damage anything on the way to the pull, or you could deal less damage to everything on the way to the pull, but then when you pull everything, you switch to Utito. But it's interesting that they're keeping this as a spell when you would only be able to have either this or Utito active, but now you can have this and Utito active at the same time, can't you? So you could actually, let's see. So Utito is 40% extra distance fighting if you have this, the Utito stance. And you do 40 minus 30, and you're still better off in terms of diamond arrows, at least, you're still better off using Swiftfoot even if you have Sharpshooter active, because you still get a 10% extra damage buff, whatever. I mean, the math doesn't add up exactly because this is like distance fighting and this is damage reduction, but you get the point. So this isn't necessarily going to be really bad. And the cooldowns are reduced, meaning you can spam it, so it's pretty good. Divine Caldera, base power has been increased by a seventh. Not bad. Salvation, base healing has been increased by 20%. Not bad. Divine Dazzle, jump range has been increased to 7. I don't remember what Divine Dazzle is at all. Divine Grenade now allows 3 targeting modes. This is really good. A lot of paladins love their grenade. I love that this is like, or at least I'm pretty confident that this is a Monty Python and the Holy Grail reference, so I'm also happy with this spell. But I mean, I kind of get the idea that a grenade makes sense that you're throwing it rather than dropping it at your feet, because that's not really what you would want to do with a grenade. But this is still better in terms of targeting, obviously. Now, oh, I forgot to go over to the actual augments, but Divine Barrage and Ethereal Barrage. Did they really add 4 nodes in the wheel just dedicated to these 2 spells? That's kind of that are kind of the same thing. That's kind of wild, really. And you can actually alternate these as well. So if you're in a place that takes equal damage from physical and holy, then you could just swap these two if you don't want your Masan. This is actually more of a no-brainer kind of playstyle, I guess. So you could aim at a target. That target is surrounded by a bunch of enemies. You then attack that target. You send these attacks to hit the target in a diamond arrow size thing. So it hits diamond arrow and another spell that hits the exact same area. And you could do that every turn. One of them physical, one of them holy. Is it better than Masan? Probably not, if I had to guess. Divine Dazzle augments now adds +2 targets instead of +1. Now reduced cooldown. Is Divine Dazzle the Paladin Etc.? Is that what it is? I'm guessing it is. Jump range has been increased to 7. So Paladin Etc. is more consistent. Oh yeah, so Barrage gets base damage and even more base damage. Okay, dude. Ethereal Barrage, Life Leech, and oh my god. Plus 10% crit chance is crazy. That means you deal 100% more crits than your base crit chance. So base crit chance is 10%. If you get plus 10% crit chance, that means it's now 20%. 20 is 100% higher than 10. So you're getting a 100% buff to crit chance. That is crazy because crit is so powerful. So I think Ethereal Barrage is going to be the meta. This is crazy. Just this one perk right here. Obviously, it's going to take a lot of investment because you need to reach the second perk. Nonetheless, this is going to be something you would aim for. This, I think you could just throw the Divine Barrage in the garbage. If you have Massan already, why would you even fucking need it, really? I mean, you do have the defensive stance that gives you more holy damage. I mean, more holy magic level, sorry. Still, why would you want to use that second stance instead of Utito and get 40% of your shield, of your distance fighting boosted? Yeah, so adds 2 extra targets instead of +1, and now reduces cooldown by 8 seconds instead of 4 seconds. I believe the cooldown was 16 seconds. So originally it would reduce it by 4 to 12, so it reduces it by 8 to 8. And Exeta every 8 seconds, that's still a lot. That's too much. I don't. It should probably be 10 seconds or more if it was up to me. Sorcerer. Okay, elemental stances. Let's see if they changed anything at all with Sorcerer. Starting with the promotions, the Sorcerer can now switch between 3 elemental stances. Fire, energy, and death. Fire spells a 4% increased base power. Oh, this is something I didn't know actually. That each of them is actually gives you different buffs rather than just the same buffs but for different elements. So okay, fire spells have increased base power. So Fire UE has more base power. This is pretty good then. Additionally, casting a fire spell converts the next non-fire spell into fire damage. Okay, so yeah, this changing the element of the spells is gonna be for all 3 of them, so no reason to repeat that. But fire spells have 4% increased base power. Energy spells have 4% increased critical hit chance. Critical hit chance is the best stat in the game. So this is crazy that one of the paladin spells is getting 10% crit chance. This is even crazier because every energy spell is going to have a 4% increased crit chance. So that's 40% more crits. This is really crazy. 40% more crits is a lot. I mean, it might not seem like it because it says only 4% and it looks like a small number. This number is huge. This number is crazy. Additionally, yeah, blah, blah. Death spells have 30% increased critical damage. This is nice, but nowhere near as good as 4% crit chance. Just critical hit chance is the best one. Critical hit damage or extra damage, you can get it from various sources. Critical hit chance, not so much. Additionally, casting a death spell, blah. Yeah, we get that. Crippling stances. So these are the debuff, which are now stances. Currently, they're spells. They're going to be stances. Sap strength and expose weakness turned into passives. They're unlocked with level 175. Well, that's a bit high, but I mean it makes sense because you're not really going to be party hunting before that. I mean that seems fair actually. Sap strength. Your spells, runes, and auto attacks apply sap's strength to their targets, reducing damage they deal by 10%. So enemies deal 10% less damage. Okay. This can probably stack with the EK 35% less damage taken. So a total of 45% less damage before mitigation, before dodge from armor tiers, before dodge charms, etc. EKs are going to become super, super tanky, even though probably most people would use the other one. Your spells, runes, and auto attacks apply expose weakness to their targets, granting 8% elemental pierce to attackers. So this would I don't want to misinform anybody, but the way I understand this, what it means is 8% of the or you attack enemies with as if they have 8% less resistance towards the element that you're using. Sadly, this is only elemental, so it's not going to apply to diamond arrows at all, so paladins are going to get a bit fucked from this. And monks are also probably going to be fucked if they're using physical weapons. EKs almost always use powerful elemental weapons, so this is not going to be a problem for EKs, but if monk happens to be using a physical weapon, then this is going to be useless to him and to RPs. So maybe the first one is probably more versatile. I don't know, but again, this is probably what most people are going to use because this is the DPS option. This is the defensive option, the first one. The stances replace these stances replace the spells, which are no longer available. Didn't they say that already? I guess not. Sorcerers can have one elemental stance and one crippling stance active at the same time. This goes without saying because these 2 stances are the same thing and interchangeable, and these 3 stances are the same thing and interchangeable, but these 2 things are separate categories. One of them is for the debuffs, the other one is the actual stances. New spells. Death Echo. They changed the name for this. Wasn't it called something like Death Blast? Anyway, hits a 5x5 area, and after 1 second delay, the same area is hit again for 50% of the initial damage. This is crazy because you could cast the spell. What's the cooldown on it? They do not really... Oh, 6-second cooldown. So let's just try to count turns. So turn 1, you cast the spell. You deal however much damage. 2 seconds later, so the spell has 4 seconds cooldown. Sorry, 1 second later, you deal damage again. So that's 2 instances of damage. 1 second after the second instance of damage, you can cast another spell. Then another spell, then another spell after that. Then you can cast this one again. And Death Echo would be a really, really viable way to trigger the second part of Master of Decay. So casting a death spell converts the next non-death spell into death damage. So if you're trying to deal death AoE, if you're in a spawn that is weak to death, like Dark Thighs, you would use probably something like Death Echo, then follow it with a Fire UE, which would then be converted to death damage. Then you would probably do some other spell, which would not affect anything else, maybe Death Beam if you really wanted to. And you really want to stick to doing as many spells of the element that your stance is as possible. Because, as you can see, if you want to deal death damage, you want all your spells to be death. So it'd probably rotate mostly death spells to gain the 30% critical extra damage bonus. So any spell that isn't going to be the death element is not going to get this. So you would probably want to focus specifically on whatever elemental stance you're running. It has 2 targeting modes with crosshairs and with cursor position. So this would be basically like a 5x5 rune. And this is kind of wild. At first what they did is that it hit a small area the second time, but for the same amount of damage. Now it hits the same area, but for the second hit is lower damage. But it doesn't really matter because... But by the way, I believe that this cannot proc charms on the second hit. So keep that in mind. You would think that this would bypass your restriction on AoE charm procking. As far as I know, Sipsoft said that this cannot double proc charms. So the main point of the second blast is gone, but it's still extra damage, so why not? You can consider it as a 5x5 spell that is 150% the strength of the original one, just dealt 1 second later instead. This is going to be interesting. I want to see if people are even going to be bother using this, because sorcerers in general are getting a lot of cool stuff. Existing spell improvements. Okay, let's go. Great Death Beam becomes a regular spell that can be learned from level 66. So instead of wheel perks, it's now default, which is great. Lightning. Now changed to 2 additional targets. Base power has been increased from 70 to 110. Range increased from 5 to 7. I don't know what lightning is. I've never seen it used. Is it a chaining spell kind of like monks, or is it a forking spell kind of like druids? What is it? I don't know. But it's good that they're buffing it. I mean, MSs do need to be a DPS vocation to compensate for EKs using one-handed. Obviously, people are mostly going to use whatever they're used to, so EKs with two-handed, sorcerers just using the regular rotations. It's going to take people a lot of time to adjust. But I hope that people will actually embrace it, because it's going to be pretty cool. Strong Energy Strike, Flame Strike, Ultimate Energy Strike, and Flame Strike. Increased stuff. I don't care. They increased it for druids as well, as far as I remember. And, I mean, you use them opportunistically on when you have like one monster left at red HP. This is not really something you're really going to use. If anything, I would rather that they reduce the cooldowns of the ultimate strikes. That would have been actually useful. But they're never going to do that. New survivability mechanic, mana buffer. So, I'm not going to read it when we get back to Druids. Druids get the same thing. I'm not going to read that again. Neither am I going to read the ultimate and strong strikes, because Druids got that bonus as well. If incoming damage would exceed current hit points, in other words, if you take a hit that would have otherwise been lethal, the overkill amount is multiplied by 8 and subtracted from mana. So if you have 1 HP left, and you take 1000 damage, you would take 999 times 8 damage to your mana instead of dying. That's what it does. And it's wild, but additionally, 25% of the character's maximum mana is consumed, but this additional mana consumption can only trigger once every 2 seconds. So I'm going to need to describe a little bit of the history of the changes they made with this thing. I'll just grab some more coffee. So first what they did is 8% of the character's maximum mana was consumed for every instance of damage. So if you're boxed and 8 monsters are hitting you just with a melee attack, that is already 64% of your mana gone in 1 second. And that's without all the extra damage coming in. So basically this will just drain people's mana instantly. So instead of 8%, they raised it to 25%. So it's way, way, way more, but it can only trigger once every 2 seconds. In other words, let's say I have full mana. I have, let's say, 100,000 mana, just for easy computation. So I have 100,000 mana, I have 1 HP left. As I start taking damage, multiply it by 8, and reduce it from my mana, plus a quarter of my mana is gone every 2 seconds. So, as long as you're taking damage, this is not going to help you last more than 8 seconds. More likely, it's not even going to let you survive for 4 whole seconds, because in 4 seconds you lose 50% of your mana, regardless of how much mana you're taking from the actual attacks that get multiplied by 8 and subtracted from mana. In other words, this is way more punishing, which is good, because this was a little bit too overpowered before they gave it any nerfs. So at first it was just this, where the damage was multiplied by 8 and subtracted. But in various situations, I let's say when I was trying to die on purpose on test server, it would take me 3 to 4 seconds to die from 0 HP. So this was kind of powerful. It made Gift of Life almost arbitrary. But yeah, I'm glad they changed Gift of Life. So now this is going to be pretty good. And Mana Buffer is a good survivability tool. If the mana runs out, the character dies. Obviously, yes. Mana Buffer is available for sorcerers and druids. Here's the thing. I don't know why sorcerers get this. It makes no sense. Because in today's Tibia, sorcerers, I could understand if they got this now, because they need to sometimes skip a healing turn on themselves and an attack turn by throwing runes in order to use a UH on the EK. So they're taking a risk, and to mitigate that risk, you need them to have some kind of survivability mechanic if they take a headshot. But after the update, there are no more UHs, so the only person the MS has to give any shit about whatsoever is himself. So why do they need a survivability tool like EDs? So for EDs, it's duh. I mean, it makes perfect sense, because if your ED dies, the rest of the team will follow, because the EDs are now the only healers and the only ones able to heal anybody else in the team. So you need to protect your EDs. You need your EDs not to die, and your EDs do skip healing turns on themselves to heal other people. So they need a survivability mechanic to prevent them from dying when they do need to heal somebody else instead of themselves. Why do MSs need this? I don't know. But I'm not going to complain. I mean, MSs are right now a pretty bad vocation. With these changes, they're going to be probably the top tier vocation. Wand improvements. Numerous strike imbuement limitations have been removed. In other words, rods, I'm guessing that what this means is that rods that could only get up to intricate strike can now get powerful strike. Or I'm hoping that, let's say, Druid's Lion Rod would have the strike imbuement limitation removed, so I could actually imbue it with crit, even though it already has innate crit. I don't think they're going to do that. I think it's the first, not the second option, but I guess we'll see. Attacks now generate mana instead of consuming mana. This is cute, but after level 30, this kind of doesn't do anything anymore. Range has been increased for wands and rods. This is really, really good. Probably better than both of these. Why? Because now your rod is the only method by which you can actually generate an extra charm proc per turn. So the AoE Diamond Arrow charm procking is gone, but you still get a charm proc on your original target. And it is still important to choose your targets even with rods because you would get free charm procs on a specific enemy. So let's say you're hunting somewhere and you have one of the enemies that has 5 dust. So a 5 duster is gonna have way higher health, meaning it's gonna take way more damage from charms. Also, if you're kiting the monsters like mages do, then you really want to keep attacking it while you're running. But then what would happen is you would clear the entire group that he's surrounded himself with, and he's going to stay by himself, and then you have to deal with him by himself. If you target the dusters, then the charm procs are going to maybe not completely make them die at the same time as the rest of the monsters that are next to them, but at least closer to when the rest of the monsters around them die. If you get lucky and hit a few charm procs, then eventually the monster is going to die as fast as the rest of the pool that he's in. So again, it's really good, and the range increase allows you to proc charms on enemies that are on the most distant parts of your screen. I believe that the range increase is just 7 all over across the board. So anything you can see in your screen, you can hit with your wand. I don't see why that wasn't the case now. Now, Wheel of Destiny adjustments. This is where things get pretty interesting. Special spells augments -4 seconds cooldown, plus 50% base damage, replace magic shield. So special spells augments, I think the special spells is referring to these two. Sorry, I mean these things. So strong and ultimate strikes. That's at least how it was previously, but I may be wrong. I don't know what special spells would mean otherwise. Death Echo augments, -2 seconds cooldown. What was it, 6? So you could potentially cast this every other turn if you have this augment. That is kind of crazy, and it's the first one, not the second one. So arguably you wouldn't even really need to take the second one because of the heavy cost in wheel points. But the -2 seconds cooldown is really, really interesting because, like I said, you could do, if you're on, let's say, Master of Decay, which is what you're gonna be on if you're using mostly death spells, and you want to benefit from the increased crit damage, then you need to cast the spell to convert the next one. So you would cast Death Echo, then you would cast UE, then you would cast Death Echo, then you would cast Fire Wave, which deals death damage, then you would cast Death Echo, then you would cast something else, and you just keep rotating Death Echo every other turn to convert the next spell into death. So with the -2 second cooldown, you don't have any awkward rotations where you deal death, you convert the next spell to death, and then the third spell in your rotation doesn't get the death benefit anymore because your last spell was a fire UE. Right? So this is going to be pretty cool. It would allow you to modify your next spell all the time. So it's really good that it's the first perk because this is probably going to be a must-have. Beam Mastery has been reworked. Beam is now hit adjacent squares for 80% of the initial damage. Wow. Okay, I remember it being 50%. 80% is wild. So what this is going to do is beams are now 1 square wide. With beam mastery, it's now 3 squares wide, where the center, so the center square meter of the three is going to be benefiting from up to 80% of the initial damage. That is wild. But obviously, that's going to be for very high levels, but still, that means that essentially you're dealing 100% of the damage, because 80 is not that far from 100, to a gigantic AoE of 3 by 7. So you could potentially hit 21 monsters. You could easily hit double boxes for all of that damage. This is pretty crazy. This is kind of wild, and there are death beams. So if you're using the death stance, you could do uh, a death beam, and then cast another spell, and then death echo, and then another spell. And the death beam is going to be really powerful because it's already powerful, but now you're getting 3 beams essentially instead of 1. You're tripling the AoE. Crazy. Lord of Destruction replaces Drained Body. What was Drained Body? I do not know. Improves the buffs provided by the elemental stances. Okay, so yeah, this is what improves the buff of the elemental. Oh, no, sorry. Improves the buffs of the elemental stances. So, whatever it says here it's going to be more. I guess let's see how. Uh, Master of Flames gains 4% base power for fire spells, for a total of 8. Hot damn. Holy shit. Master of Thunder gains 8% critical hit chance. Essentially, they get almost double their crit chance of what. Double their crit chance almost, so a lot more damage, way higher DPS, even more than RPs were getting. So RPs get 10% crit chance, but only for a spell that has a 4-second cooldown. MSs are just getting it flat on every energy damage spell. That is wild. That is crazy. This is going to be abused as fuck, especially because Energy Wave is really, really, really good already. So energy waves are going to be massive. They're going to do so much fucking damage. Master of Decay, 30% extra crit damage for death spells for a total of 60 crit damage. Okay, now 60% crit damage is pretty hefty. So I think people would really want to invest in the Lord of Destruction slice. Focus Mastery now additionally reduces the group cooldown of focus spells by 2 seconds. I really don't know what this actually means. What is focus stuff? Like support spell cooldowns? I don't know what focus means. Like focus group cooldowns. Okay, whatever. Energy Wave. Augments 1 and 2 have been switched. Oh, wow. So the first perk is the bigger size for Energy Wave, which gets 80% more crit, or 80% more chance to crit than it is now. That is crazy. And 2 now increases base damage by plus 10% instead of plus 5. Playing Energy Sorcerer and Death Sorcerer are going to be very, very interesting. Druid. Okay, now the stuff that I actually know everything about. Starting with the promotion, a Druid can now switch between 2 stances. Shared Conservation and Elemental Synthesis. So let's go over Elemental first because it's the simpler one. Grants 10% of your magic level as additional Ice and Earth magic level. So what does this mean? As I've tested on test server, this applies to runes as well as spells. So with Elemental Synthesis stance, your rune damage is significantly buffed. So my magic level with full gear, currently in Tibia, goes up to 173. If I get 10% of my magic level as for earth damage, or sorry, if I get 10% of my magic level, including all of the gear and everything. It's not base magic level, it's your full magic level, as additional earth magic level. So in total, 173. 10% of that is 17, rounding down. So that would be 190 magic level for earth damage. No wonder I was dealing more damage than Tibia currently with earth runes, even though they nerfed earth rune damage and that I didn't even have runic mastery active. So the 10% of my magic level, extra magic level, was enough to offset the fact that I wasn't using runic mastery and the nerf that Sipsoft introduced in the runes damage formulas. So this is really good. Now, shared conservation is going to be what druids are pretty much always going to be using, unless they're hunting solo. Because Heal Friend and Nature's Embrace heal a secondary party target in the game window for 30 seconds. Oh, party target in the game window. Okay, so it would heal only party members and only if you can see them for 30% of the healing of the CO or Grand CO. So, let's say I heal 2,000 with CO. 30% of that, so 600, is going to, I'm going to heal, if I'm duo, I would heal myself for 600 every turn by COing my EK. Yes, this does. Additionally, your self-healing is increased by 10%. So, for solo players, this is increased self-healing. At first, I'm not going to go over how they introduced these stances in the first place, but in my first video about these changes, they had 3 stances. One of the stances would double the cooldowns of all of your healing spells, but double their effects as well. And I theorized about how you could rotate healing spells, so you could introduce a healing spell rotation in order to pretty much completely ignore the fact that it has longer cooldown by just alternating different healing spells when your first healing spell is on cooldown. Unfortunately, that's not how they implemented it, and instead they just added a 2-second glow internal cooldown every time you cast a healing spell. So if you cast a healing spell, you couldn't heal anybody, even yourself, the next second. So you'd have to wait an extra second just to heal yourself after a CO. That was disastrous. I tried to heal a friend of mine in Rotten Blood, just me and him, and we survived pretty well for a few seconds, luckily, because EKs became so tanky that he was able to kind of manage with way less CO. But I didn't realize it, and I died pretty quickly afterwards because I wasn't able to heal myself. So they completely got rid of that thing, even though that is what I got the most excited about when it came to these changes. That's the stance I assumed that I would be using the whole time. Unfortunately, they removed it completely. But what they replaced it with is not bad, because they got rid of one of those 3 stances, like I just explained, and they merged the other 2 into the same stance. So essentially, one of these stances is really, really powerful because it includes both of the previous stances at the same time. So whenever you heal a friend, the lowest health percentage party member in your team will get 30% of it. It says heal a secondary party target, but what it means is the lowest health party target. Elemental Synthesis, like I said, we went over it. It deals more damage with elemental spells. Give me a second, please. About that. Healing adjustments. Heal Friend and Nature's Embrace now heal more consistently. Lower highs and higher lows. This is new, actually. This is new. This wasn't announced even, I think. I don't remember this being the case at all. Lower highs and higher lows means that just basically the entire damage formula for healing it was improved. I like this, and again, obviously, EDs now the entire team's safety rests in the hands of only EDs and monks. But since monks are new and it would take them a bunch of time to catch up to however many EDs exist now in Tibia and getting on those levels, EDs are probably going to be still the go-to, and it's good that they're getting better healing to compensate for the lack of UHs. H's embrace base power healing. Base power healing has been increased from 650 to 2000. I have seen screenshots and videos of people being healed, of the highest level EKs in Tibia being healed completely. In other words, it's impossible to test just how much you can heal with this, with Exura Gran CO, because there aren't EKs with enough health to test it. I'm guessing you could plug in the actual formulas and kind of figure out a theoretical number, but from what I know, this could let people heal for at least 47,000 health. Take it for what it's worth. This is crazy. This can heal EKs pretty much completely, especially if you're into, and if you think about it like this, they're going to get to it in a second, where Grove allows healing to crit. So imagine you're using Exorgran CO, which is now more than twice, almost 3 times as strong. No, more than 3 times as strong. And it crits, and it heals another party member because you're in shared conservation for 30% of that. So if we're talking about the higher upper limits, 30% of 40 whatever thousand is basically a full HP heal to whoever else is injured except that EK, and that's assuming the EK is at 1% health. Now, here's something that I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't put in as they didn't add yet, and this is something that I guess remains to be seen. So, with shared conservation, how it worked before is, let's say my EK is at full health, but I'm injured, and we're hunting duo, so I'm the only other party member on screen, so it should heal only me as the secondary target, right? So if my EK is at full health, and I heal him for 2 HP, right, because he lost only 2 health, then I would get 30% of 2, instead of 30% of however much it would have been if they were low HP. In other words, this could end up being very useless in certain situations. Sipsoft addressed it, they wrote about it, and they said that the overkill amount of healing will still go to the target. So basically, if your RP is injured and your EK is full HP, and you heal the EK who's already at full HP, the RP is going to get 30% of what that heal would have been. If you understand me, I think I've been pretty clear. Healing adjustments: heal friend and nature's embrace. Oh yeah, we've been through that already. Forked glaciers and forked thorns. My two new loves of my life. So hits your target and up to 6 additional targets nearby, dealing ice damage. 97 base power, 6-second cooldown, 180 mana, learned at level 90. We've already seen what this does, and I think hitting 6 additional targets, they're not saying what range it's going to have, but I'm assuming they're going to keep it. I'm hoping that they're going to keep it as it was when it was overpowered during the last day of test server, of which I've uploaded a hunt of mine in uh, in Norkferatu. Check that video if you haven't already. Combining these with runes was really, really crazy. And even hunting with just these two and no runes was also really crazy. Now, I don't know why they decided to make this fork to less target, the Earth one, considering that Earth is usually worse than Ice in terms of generally as an element. But it's good. They basically okay. So again, these two spells are crazy. I hope that they're gonna chain to 7 square meters away. That crazy range that it had on the last day of test server, because that was fucking wild. That was crazy. I loved it. So same thing, 5 targets instead of 6. The strong strikes and ultimate strikes, who gives a shit? Nobody. Strong Ice Wave cooldown has been reduced to 4 seconds and size has been increased. So instead of needing to take any wheel points whatsoever in Ice Wave, which on test server completely fucked up my wheel, so I kept mentioning that I didn't have Runic Mastery active. That is exactly because I needed to activate both nodes of Strong Ice Wave to make it larger. But here's the interesting thing: they're not explaining. They're not explaining how the Strong Ice Wave was actually affected. They're not explaining. I mean, what it means that the size has been increased, but they did explain it in the previous post. So I'll try to look it up here right now. Wait a minute. Do this. Okay. Oh, it actually saved it. Perfect. I'm just making sure you guys can see. Okay, yes. So, in red is what Ice Wave is right now. Green is where the ED is standing, and this is the shape of Ice Wave currently. The increased size, the default increased size, so they're just gonna flat out change Ice Wave to be the red and orange. So now Ice Wave, you would, so usually, let's say if I was using Ice Wave up until now, let's try to get a circle here. So the EK would be standing here, right? Damn it. Okay, so the EK would be standing where the yellow circle is. And I would hit 5 monsters around the EK, or I could step 1 step closer. Right? And the EK would be here. And then I would hit 6 monsters potentially, with these 2 squares being part of the box but not being hit at all. So instead, they're doing it a 3x3 with 1 extra square meter in front of you, which means you could actually cast it from 1 square meter further back. And for the record, Terra Wave would end where the yellow line is, right? So a Terra Wave would have these 9 squares. For Ice Wave, you would need to step 1 step closer for these 9 squares. But overall, both Ice and Earth Waves will now be able to hit the full box. But if you take the wheel perks for extended range of Ice Wave, then you get this extra yellow border. So then Ice Wave is going to have the red and the yellow. So all of these squares are going to be the improved Ice Wave. This, I think, is even better than how it was originally on test server when you took both perks. I don't think we had a chance to play around with this at all. I think they suggested this change after they already took down test server, if I'm not mistaken. So this is something that you would have to still invest a lot of wheel points on. So not that great, really. but at least you won't have to invest so many points to get the 3x3. Oh, you wouldn't have to waste any points to get the 3x3. This would mainly be used in party hunts but not solo hunts. Maybe it's still vaguely usable in solo hunts. It's more consistent than what it is now, obviously, because you have 3 more squares, which is like 50% more squares almost. Still, I mean, you don't have to go for the full extended Ice Wave. That is a massive amount of points to be wasted. Now, it still remains to be seen if the augment will actually... So if the first augment increases the size or the second. Let's actually check. Strong Ice Wave augments. Nope, it's the second one that enlarges the area. So whatever was in the yellow in the previous tab, that is only the second perk. The first one is 6% base damage. So yeah, if you want that super duper extra large Ice Wave, you would still need to invest a lot of points for it. But let's keep going. Wrath of Nature, base damage has been increased from 150 to 175 and is now more consistent. I don't know what more consistent means. They never explained it. But I'm not going to complain about Wrath of Nature's base damage being increased. I think it should have been 200, though, or 195, or something like that. Because Wrath of Nature is pathetically weak. Earthwave is stronger. Sometimes runes are stronger. That's kind of stupid from a spell that's supposed to be your ultimate. If it was anywhere closer to the range of Ice UE, it would have been nice. This increase in damage doesn't seem to cut the mustard for me. I think this isn't enough of a damage increase to actually make any kind of difference in how people use it. I don't know what more consistent means, though. Is it going to have a lower cooldown? Is it going to stop missing monsters, something that it never did? What does more consistent mean? I don't know. New survivability mechanic, mana buffer, which we went over with sorcerers. Rod improvements, numerous strike improvement limitations imbuement limitations have been reduced. Same as sorcerers exactly. Wheel of Destiny adjustments. Forked spells, -2 cooldown and +1 target. So, you would usually prioritize this over the strong Ice Wave one. Because look how many points you have to invest in to get the extra area. Meanwhile, forked spells, you get the -2 second cooldown right away, which means that they now have 2 seconds cooldown. Where is it? Yep, these go from 4 to 6, so they now have 4 seconds cooldown, meaning you could do Glacier, Thorns, Glacier, Thorns, which is what I did in most of my previous videos, just to experiment with alternating these two. And it was super duper effective. And the +1 target is going to be nice. So +1 target raises this to 7, which is not quite a box, but it deals enough damage to compensate for the fact that it's not a full box. And the Forked Thorns is going to be to 6 targets, which is also not a full box. But going from 5 to 6 is a pretty huge jump. It's like a 20% increase. Right? This is less of an increase, probably 13% or 15% or whatever. Okay. Now, +1 target and -2 second cooldown. I'm really happy that they chose these rather than any kind of base damage increase, because you want them to hit more targets and you want to be able to use them all the time. Basically as your default spells, your go-to spells, instead of using runes, and to hit as many enemies as you can, considering that you're going to be using it instead of hitting runes, which hit a lot of targets. So yeah, this is going to be completely viable, and as I showed in my videos, the way you would use this, so let's say you're in solo hunting, is you would be kiting a whole giant group of enemies. As long as you have more than, let's say, 10 enemies, you would throw runes. Once you're down to 10 enemies or less, you would switch to forked spells, because these deal about twice as much damage as runes, 2 less targets, so you would need to choose if you're going to use a rune or a forked spell, based on the amount of enemies that you're facing at that exact time. So if you have a big pull, you're going to be using runes, and if you have a smaller pull, you're going to finish them off with forked spells, with the caveat that in really narrow places, you would prioritize using forked spells over runes, even in large groups, because these would kill off the red HP targets way more easily than runes would. So you would have less enemies that you would need to squeeze through narrow passageways. So this is mostly for narrow spots to use instead of runes, but also when you're facing smaller groups of enemies rather than gigantic groups of enemies. And for lower levels, you're not going to be facing more than 7 or 8 enemies anyway. Well, 5 or 6 enemies, because if you're lower level, you're not going to really get the +1 target. But anyway, for lower levels, this is going to be crazy because lower levels don't really face large groups of monsters. They face a handful of them at a time. So this is going to be great. Heal friend augments. Base heal, base heal. So just overall, if you take both nodes, it's going to be a 10% base heal bonus. The heal friend nodes are way less demanding in terms of points than this or the strong ice wave one. Well, maybe this as well. I don't know where the locations of these nodes are. But the strong ice wave one, one of the ice wave perks is all the way as the last perk of the slice. So this is going to be very, very expensive. Healing League now heals yourself for 25% of the healing of Nature's Embrace, or heal friends instead of 10. So they added 150% extra healing to yourself from Healing League. And this actually is interesting if you synergize it with Shared Conservation. So Shared Conservation, whenever you CO anybody, another party member is going to be healed for 30. So imagine you have this stance and you have Healing Link active, which again, this one also demands a very hefty investment in points because this is also the last perk of the Gift of Life Slice. So this heals yourself for 25. So there's two scenarios. If you're duo, this would heal you 30% from your CO because you're using the stance, and another 25 because you're using Healing Link. So now if you heal your EK, if I heal my EK for 2,000, I'm now going to heal myself for over 1,000. Every turn, every CO turn. So twice per attack turn or once per second, I would get 1,000 health. That is crazy. That is actually really, really good. It's half as efficient as healing myself with Exura Vita. It's really good. But again, it's a pretty hefty investment, and if you're going solo, this is going to be completely useless, obviously. So, the other scenario is if you are in a full team, and not just duo. And if you're in a full team, what can happen is, whenever you CO, you're basically healing 3 targets. You're healing your EK, or your main CO target. You're healing yourself from Healing Link for 25% of that heal, and the weakest team member besides the main CO target, so for another 30. So in total, you're healing 155% of your CO across the party. That is really, really good, and especially because you can heal 3 targets at the same time, every turn. That's kind of wild, and again, in a Tibia with no UHs, this is going to be absolutely necessary. Not Healing Link per se, but healing multiple targets per CO to compensate for the lack of UHs. Blessing of the Grove. Now this is going to be a huge one. Healing spells can now critically heal. Yes, this is one of the best changes for Druid in the game, I think, for in these entire announced changes. Critically, the problem is I'm still not confident. It says using critical hit chance and critical extra damage. Does this mean the critical extra damage that you have on your rod, in your wheel? Where is it taking these values from? I don't know. But I know that, let's say, my Sanguine Rod, the final perk gives me 1% extra critical chance. So does this mean that my COs have a 11% critical chance instead of 10? I don't know. Extra healing has been adjusted to 10% against targets below 60% of their hit point. This effect is doubled against targets below 30% of their hit points. Okay. So they've slightly nerfed Grove in terms of the extra healing. So what Grove did before, I think it was 15 or 20% of extra healing against targets below. Actually, I can check it right now. Give me 1 second. Come on. 24. Oh, sorry. 12 and 24. So 5, 9, 12 changed to 5, 7.5, 10. Okay, 6, 9, 12 was reduced to 5, 7.5, 10. Okay, that's not too bad. This effect is doubled against targets below 30% of their hit points. So this is where it actually is pretty bad, because this is 2%. But if it's doubled, that means that you lose 4% over what it would be now. But again, the fact that all healing spells can critically heal regardless of whether your target is at 60% health or not is great. Now, the target below 60% of their hit points and the effect being doubled at low hit points applies to your self-healing as well. So Blessing of the Grove is going to be a must for pretty much everybody who's hunting with a team. And also, if you have enough points to invest in it, it's going to be a pretty decent catch, even for people who are hunting solo, because they can crit heal themselves, and if they're in a terrible situation where they're getting comboed to low HP, there's a higher chance that they can make it out of it. Now, this, again, is what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the EKs getting more damage reduction the lower their health is. You can see how these two things synergize together. So EKs, the lower their health is, the less damage they take. And meanwhile, the Druid, when he heals them, the lower their health is, the more healing they get. So those two things combined would be able to keep EKs alive way more consistently, which is obviously going to be important in a Tibia without UHs. I keep repeating this, but it's going to completely change the meta, so it's worth mentioning. Now to the vocation that I know the least about, Monks. Virtues. Virtues now additionally grant bonuses to nearby party members. So Knights get damage received buff. Oh, wow. So add another minus 3%. So we had minus 35, minus 10. So minus 35 if they have Utamo, if EKs have Utamo active, and they're at 20% of their max health, plus 10% because sorcerers can debuff monsters to deal 10% less damage, and minus 3% from the monk. So in total, 48% less damage, nearly taking half damage just flat out without any kind of heavy investment. So it would be just a permanent negative 48% damage, assuming that they stack additively rather than multiplicatively, because if they are multiplicative, then there's going to be diminishing returns and stuff like that. If it's additive, then you may actually, EKs may, on full defensive mode, be able to take 48% less damage if they have a monk and a sorcerer doing their thing. Paladin, plus 60% auto attack damage. Sorcerer, spell and rune damage. This is actually going to be pretty good. And Druid, plus 12% healing done. Honestly, our healing is pretty overkill. I wish they would actually just do sorcerers and druids, spell and rune damage, but whatever. I mean, again, I can't complain. I'm the one who said I want the roles to actually feel different to play, so I guess druids being the main healer, healing it is. Mentor Other has been removed to compensate for this change. Okay. Mentor Other. Okay, I don't remember what that is. Monks benefit from the same bonuses while serene, as long as their respective vocation is present. Okay, so this is interesting. I didn't know that you need the other vocations present, but what it means is monks will now get negative 3% damage received, and 6% auto attack damage, and 6% spell and rune damage, and 12% healing done, as long as they have these party members present. I'm guessing that present means on the screen with them. Only while serene. Thousand Fist Blows. Builder spell that hits your target and the area around it. So this is basically like a rune, which is something that monks actually do need, because monks, for the most part, are wall boxers. This allows them to be a little bit more like kiters. But the 12-second cooldown is pretty shitty. So I don't know how useful this actually will be, unless this is like crazy powerful in terms of damage. Allows 3 targeting modes like they're doing with a lot of other stuff. Other improvements. Way of the Monk. Quest bonuses have been expanded. Have they just been expanded for monks or for everybody? In addition to granting up to 100% increased damage for auto attacks, each shrine now grants 2% damage reduction against melee auto attacks, up to a total of 20%. Monks get a 20% flat reduction in incoming melee auto attacks? Why? Okay, Mass Experiment is no longer a spender spell. This is pretty huge because monks had a dilemma. If they wanted to do their mass res, basically a mass healing, then they would need to spend all their... I forget what it's called. The thing they build 5 of. So it was a spender spell, and the more of the 5 thing you had, the more you would heal, but it would also be counterproductive because you're trying to build for a large hit or a large damage spell, but then you would waste it to heal your party. So it's now a spender. It's now no longer a spender. I wonder if it is a builder, though. Its cooldown, base power, and icon have been adjusted accordingly. The caster only receives a lesser effect similar to a regular Spirit Mend. So what they're trying to do is that this is a mass res, and they changed its cooldown to be closer to mass res. I think maybe even have a lower cooldown than mass res, maybe like a 1 second instead of 2. But it doesn't affect them as much as it heals the other people. At least that's what I'm understanding. Mystic Repulse, base power, and has been increased from 72 to 85. I don't care about base damage. And cooldown has been reduced from 20 to 12 seconds. Cooldown reduction is always good. Chained Penance and Spiritual Outburst. Jump range has been increased by 1. Additionally, they will now chain to the closest target instead of the target with the highest health percentage. Did it do that? I don't know if that's good. You do want your chains to heal the target with more health, because they are the ones who would be able to take more damage from the spell than monsters that have 2 HP left. But I guess it made it inconsistent in how it jumped between targets, because if you had 2 creatures with high health on opposite side of the screens, it wouldn't be able to jump between them, and your chain would end. So I guess it does make sense. Spiritual Outburst. Is that a holy elemental version of Chained Penance? I don't know. Monk Familiar is now better at hitting enemies with its spells. What does better mean in this context? Like, better how? Would it miss before? Like, what are they talking about? Okay, Wheel of Destiny adjustments. So not too many changes to Monk over what we've seen previously. Or different than, or to be fair, not even that different from how they are now. But that does make sense because they're obviously not going to get more stances because they were the only vocation with stances up until now. Wheel of Destiny adjustments. 1000 Fist blows, augment, 40% critical extra damage. Minus 6-second cooldowns. What was it now? 12-second cooldown. Builder that targets an area around you. So if it has minus 6-second cooldown, you could use this every 3 turns. So it becomes way less garbage than I thought if you have that other, if you have both perks. And the 40% critical extra damage is actually pretty wild when it comes to just a builder spell that you could use every 3 turns. Flurry of Blows, augment 1, enlarges the affected area instead of granting 5% life leech. That is a flat out buff. Life leech and the wheel, I don't know why Sipsoft do this. This is so trash. Guiding Presence now shares 100% of the mantra effect instead of 50. So mantra is the monk's ability to take less elemental damage, if I recall. So Guiding Presence is, I guess, a wheel perk, I'm guessing. A wheel perk that shares your damage reduction from elemental spells with team members. I'm guessing that's what it does. Sanctuary, 1 second. Now shares 100% of the mantra effect instead of 50. Sanctuary, in addition to its current effect, it now increases the damage you deal to adjacent enemies by 10%. And healing you do to adjacent allies by 10%. Adjacent allies? How would that work? Why would anybody be adjacent to the monk unless it's the EK? And then it does make sense. So let's say the monk wants to box next to the EK, but not full box because he needs Serenity. But you won't really get Serenity for boxing next to the EK. I'm confused about this. Why? So this would only work when you don't have Serenity? I don't get it. Do they think that monks will stand in the back line next to mages? I'm confused what the purpose of adjacent allies is, because when would a monk be adjacent to allies? And I wonder if this also includes self-healing as well, because are you an ally that's adjacent to yourself? I don't know. In the case of the druid healing, it does work like that. Like, you are an ally on your own screen for the purposes of the split CO to heal you. So, who knows, really? The damage you deal to adjacent enemies by 10%. But monks are always pretty much going to be facing adjacent enemies because they wall box. So all enemies are going to be adjacent to them for the most part. Sorry. Mystic Repulse, augment 1. Now reduces the cooldown by 6 seconds instead of minus 4. Mass Spirit Mend, augment 2. Now reduces the cooldown by 4 seconds instead of enlarging the affected area. So Mass Spirit Mend, they don't say what the cooldown for it is. And if you need to reduce the cooldown by 4 seconds, that means it's at least 5 seconds. Probably 6. Reducing it from 6 to 2, meaning using it every other turn, makes sense because that would be in line with how druids have it. Even though that would be a bit overpowered because that is what druids are supposed to do, mass rest and heal as many people as possible. If you give them the ability to use it every other turn, then they would essentially be able to spam it like druids do. Instead of enlarging the area of effect. And yeah, that's pretty much it, I see. So I'm happy with the changes. I get to keep all of the pretty toys that I enjoyed on test server. That's pretty great. But here's the problem. Sipsoft never let you really enjoy anything. So I think that what they're gonna do is they're gonna actually fuck us over by just giving a global XP nerf. By all spawns will give 10% less XP, just in order to fuck with us because we now became all vocations became more powerful. I hope for their sake that they don't do that, because that's going to completely ruin the game. Let people enjoy their new power, their new abilities. Let people chase the power fantasy. That's the whole reason why people play MMORPG. They want to, well, not all people, but at least a large enough amount of people that like playing MMORPG over shooters or any other genre, because they like the role playing, they like being a character, they like seeing their character improve, they like seeing their character grow in strength, they like seeing their character become more powerful, they like seeing what their character is capable of in terms of dealing with monsters and destroying entire rooms full of stuff. Let people do that. That's what's fun about the game. You can't try to min-max everything around balance, especially not Sipsoft, because they don't even play the game. They don't know what balance would even look like, because they don't have characters high level or low level that they actually play normal content with. They just sit there in their offices and have no clue about what the game is at all, what the meta is, how you would hunt, the consequences of various choices that they make in terms of introducing either the vocation changes or various nerfs to spawns. So I think that Sipsoft are stupid enough to actually just give a flat out nerf to all spawns in the game. I really hope that they're smart enough to not do that and just let us have this one. You've nerfed us, you've nerfed the shit out of us constantly. Please, Sipsoft, just let us have this one W, this one thing that we could have to actually feel more powerful, rather than just a constant struggle and grind constantly, and all vocations being the same thing, all content just being the same thing, and higher level content just being lower level content with higher numbers. That is not the game you want Tibia to be. What you want is to embrace the power fantasy, to improve on build diversity, so that one druid would be completely different from the other druid in how they play, just based on how they set up their wheel, their weapon proficiencies, etc. Their equipment, their augments, their tiers, all of these different choices players can make to change how one character seems from another is great. Because already at this point, everybody just is exactly the same. All druids wear the exact same best in slot gear. All paladins will use a sanguine set always. I mean, there's no scenario where you wouldn't use your best in slot, like sanguines and stuff like that. So it's good that at least they kind of let us diversify how we build our characters in other ways. So whether it's a healing-based druid or a DPS-based druid, if it's more spread out healing for more targets versus more concentrated healing for specific targets. Like, there's more versatility in how you actually design your own character build. That's always a good thing. This has been a pretty fucking long video, so if you've been watching this whole time, I'm glad that you had nothing better to do than to watch this video. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.